Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about Kneehigh Theatre's play, The Red Shoes. So, if you've watched my other videos about Kneehigh Theatre plays, you'll know that they are unique. And The Red Shoes is no exception. Now, I think this is based on a fairy tale, but I'm not 100% sure about that. And the introduction to this particular play gives us less information about the backstory than the introductions to the other plays in this collection. The story itself is straightforward but somewhat bizarre. It's about a young girl, an orphan, living in the streets, who's desperate for a pair of red shoes. So she paints her feet red. A rich older woman is driving by and sees this girl with painted red feet and is like, "You're pretty poor and I'm pretty rich. I'm going to take you in and give you clothes, and then in a separate instance, I'm going to give you shoes." The shoes bit is a little bit weird here because the old woman saw this girl as she was driving by, as the old woman was driving by, that is. And yet, when the cobbler is making her shoes, because she gets custom-made shoes, the old woman's like, "Are they black shoes? Good for churchin'?" And the girl's like, "Yeah, they're totally black shoes, but they're actually red shoes." Tricky. But, so, like, it's a weird kind of thing because that bit where the girl tells the old woman that, yeah, they're black shoes, kind of requires that the old woman be blind, or mostly blind, but she saw this girl out of her car. So that, I mean, there's a weird discontinuity there. But the purpose of this is so that the girl can get the red shoes that she desperately wants. Then the old woman's like, "Church time, let's head out for First Communion." Everybody in the church is like, "Holy Jesus, she's wearing red shoes in church," which is apparently not kosher. Then the priest, when the girl gets up to take First Communion, is like, "You are wearing red shoes. Get out of my church and never come back." So she does. And the old woman's like, "I will take your red shoes and you will not have them." And so that happens, but then the girl gets them back. She puts the red shoes on and she starts dancing, which is apparently what she really wanted to do. And just not okay. Wearing red shoes and dancing are apparently big sins in the world of this play. So she's dancing continually, compulsively, and eventually she's like, I'd kind of like to stop dancing now, but I can't because of these shoes. And so she keeps dancing against her will. She dances back to the church and is like, "Let me in." And they're like, "Nah, son." And then she's like, "Let me in." And an angel is like, "Listen, I'm on the radio and you're kind of messing with me, so you've got to stop." Like CB radio, not like an angelic disc jockey or something like that. Like, this is like, I'm up in a plane communicating with other planes or whatever it is. And so she's like, "No, let me in the church." And the angel's like, "Fine, because you won't stop. I'm going to curse you that you will dance forever until you die." So that's going on. She's dancing. She's increasingly unhappy with dancing, but unable to stop. Then she finds a butcher, as you do. And stage directions here say, the girl grabs the butcher's knife and tries to cut her feet off. He stops her. little bit later, she tries again. 2 unsuccessful attempts to cut her feet off, at which point the butcher is basically like, listen, I'm a butcher. I know all about cutting feet off. I will do this for you. So, the butcher cuts off her feet. Yeah. Perfectly rational response. And then the butcher basically makes her a pair of wooden feet. Because he's also apparently a carpenter. That's another skill set that he has. So he's cut off her feet, made her a pair of wooden feet. Predictably, she's not super stable on her new wooden feet, so he's like, here's 2 brooms you can use as crutches. Off you go. So she goes back to the church, and everybody in the church is basically just ignoring her, except the pastor's wife, who's like, oh, you've committed a lot of big sins, but you can sweep the church until you're redeemed in God's eyes. And then the pastor's like, wife, don't talk to her, she's a sinner. Which is very, very pastorly of him, very priestly of him, whatever, I forget what he is exactly, a priest, pastor. Whatever it is. Preacher. So, anyway, she does that, she sweeps the church for a long time, and then an angel comes down and is like, listen, you've suffered enough for your dancing and wearing of red shoes. Now you can come to heaven. And she's like, I think not. So that's basically the plot line. What I think is really interesting about this play, though, is actually not so much the plot line as the dramaturgical approach that the play takes. And we get this right from the beginning, because it's unusually for a drama, there's very little actual dialogue here. Much of what occurs is narrated and performed. So, the opening stage directions tell us 4 storytellers enter in grubby vests and pants with suitcases. They wash their feet, put on their shoes, and wait. A beautiful woman enters. She is a glamorous and glorious transvestite. Now, I think one of the interesting things about that is the stage directions tell us immediately that she's a transvestite, that Lydia is a transvestite. I get the sense that in performance that's supposed to be a surprise, because at the very end, we have this stage direction. Lydia is now a man dressed only in vest and pants like the others. And so Lydia joins the storytellers as this sort of nondescript, non-character, potential character at the end of the play. And I think that's supposed to be a big reveal. Like, I think we weren't supposed to know that Lydia was a transvestite, which is kind of an odd thing, because the stage directions, for anyone reading the play, the stage directions tell us right from the beginning. So that's the thing. But anyway, so Lydia comes on. So you've got the 4 storytellers and Lydia. What Lydia kind of does is she narrates this whole story. So Lydia actually gives us what would be dialogue. She gives us what would be monologues or soliloquies. She tells us what characters are thinking and feeling, and that sort of moves the whole play forward. There are a few bits where the other actors actually speak, but for the most part, they're just sort of performing this story as Lydia narrates it. But Lydia also sort of calls them into being as these characters. So, for instance, we have a set of stage directions here when she's opening the play, basically. It says, she chooses one of the storytellers to play the girl. The other storytellers clothe her. So the characters come into being because Lydia sort of selects them and says, you're going to be this character. And then they perform that character, even though Lydia is still largely the one doing the narrating, largely the one doing the talking. So that's an interesting approach. That's almost more like it's you have a narrator, and it's almost more like watching a movie or a TV show or something like that with a voiceover telling you about the action that's going on. So it's an interesting approach. But one of the other things that's interesting about the dramaturgical style here, and particularly about Lydia, is that Lydia periodically just takes us out of the storyline to give us something randomly other. So, like, after discovering that the girl has worn her red shoes to church, the old lady collapses in the girl's arms. Lydia says, enough, enough. Stage directions say Lydia claps her hands and the storytellers run off. Lydia says, let's draw a curtain around this troubling scene. Our girl's youthful ways seem to be taking their toll on the old lady's health. And those red shoes, they're very obsessive, aren't they? One has to ask the eternal question, can we ever escape our obsessions? Well, I don't know. I honestly don't have the foggiest. But there is a girl who might be able to help us. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for more of Justine. Justine will now perform for you the Escapologist. So, Justine is another character who periodically is brought on by Lydia to do sort of magic tricks in almost this like variety show, vaudeville type way. And so Lydia just interrupts the flow of this plot periodically to be like, here's Justine doing a magic trick. Ha-ha! And so it's an interesting technique because on the one hand, it clearly breaks up any remaining illusion that this is a naturalistic play, or that the way that this play is put on represents reality or asks us to willingly suspend our disbelief or something like this. It clearly disrupts that idea. This is clearly non-realistic, non-linear. It's also an interesting narrative technique because having these sorts of interruptions can actually create tension as we, the viewers, wonder what's going to happen. So it's an interesting dramaturgical structure, and it's not something that you normally see with most plays. But again, Kneehigh Theatre has their own unique approach to performance and to dramaturgy.